The Queen's command Jace was just a cleaner, a human janitor. On a ship filled with powerful aliens, glowing machines, and royal guests from across the galaxy, he was nobody. His job was simple: keep the royal bath chambers spotless. Don't speak. Don't touch anything. And most of all, never look directly at the Queen. But that day, everything changed. The large marble room steamed with soft lavender mist. Jace was alone, scrubbing tiles on his knees. The water in the royal pool shimmered, and the light above changed color every few seconds. He had just started mopping the sea edge when the door behind him opened with a loud hiss. His hands stopped moving. He didn't need to turn. He felt her enter. The air grew heavy. Every instinct in his body told him to bow, to hide, to vanish. But then came her voice, smooth like silk, cold like ice. "You, human." Jace slowly turned his head. He saw her reflection in the polished wall. She was tall, 8 feet, maybe more, skin like pale silver metal. Her eyes glowed violet. Her long hair fell around her like dark liquid, and her armor dropped away in quiet layers as she walked forward. She was Queen Jalara, ruler of the Vraxian Empire. Untouchable, deadly, feared across 1,000 worlds. And now, she was completely nude, stepping into the royal bath. Jace quickly looked down, his heart racing. I didn't know you were—" "Silence," he obeyed. She sank into the glowing water, long limbs moving like a goddess. Steam rose around her. She leaned her head forward. Then came the words Jace would never forget: "Scrub my back." He froze. He thought maybe he heard wrong, but she didn't speak again. She waited. His hands trembled. He looked around. Was this a test? A joke? Would guards appear and shoot him the moment he touched her? But nothing happened. Only silence. Slowly. Carefully. He picked up the soft alien sponge. His legs shook as he stood and stepped toward her. She didn't move. She only raised her hair and exposed her long, bare back, silver skin glistening with mist. He placed the sponge on her back and gently moved it. One slow circle, then another. She made no sound. Then suddenly, she spoke again. "Do you fear me?" He almost dropped the sponge. Yes, he admitted. "Good. Fear keeps most people away. But you stayed." He didn't know what to say. He just kept scrubbing, soft, respectful, careful. "Do you know what they call me?" She asked quietly. He nodded. "The Frozen Throne." "Yes," she whispered. "Because my heart is cold. Or so they think." She leaned forward more, letting the water rise to her shoulders. "But I grow tired, human. Tired of power. Tired of people who lie to me. Tired of silence, and of being alone." Jace blinked. Was she really saying this? A queen speaking of loneliness? He cleared his throat. "But you're the most powerful being on this ship, maybe in the galaxy. And yet here I sit asking a janitor to wash away the silence." The room stayed quiet. Jace continued scrubbing, slower now. Gentler. He didn't understand what this was, but he saw something in her. Beneath the cold voice and glowing eyes. She wasn't just a queen. She was a woman. A lonely one. As he finished, she stood slowly. The water rolled down her metallic skin. She stepped out without shame or word, picking up a robe from the hook beside her. She didn't look at him. But as she reached the door, she paused. "Return tomorrow, same time." Then she left. Jace stood frozen in the mist, heart pounding. What just happened? Why him? And why did her voice sound almost sad? He looked down at the sponge in his hand. Something told him this was only the beginning. The next day, Jace couldn't focus. He spilled soap water twice, forgot to sanitize the crystal floors, dropped a bucket near the ambassador's chamber. and got yelled at by the head steward. His mind was stuck in that moment. The Queen. Her voice. Her eyes. Her request. Why had she asked him to scrub her back? Why call for him again? The thought alone made his heart pound and his hands sweat. Still, when the royal bath time arrived, Jace walked in, his clothes clean, his tools ready, and his nerves on fire. She was already there. Queen Jalara stood at the far end of the room, looking up through the transparent ceiling. Above them 1,000 stars shined. Her long robe shimmered in the blue light, and her silver hair glowed like moonlight. He bowed low. "You called me? Your Majesty?" "Do you know what that star is?" she asked, pointing upward without turning around. Jace looked up. One star, bright and red, blinked slowly near the edge of the dome. "I don't," he answered honestly. "That was my mother's homeworld, burned during a rebellion. The people there screamed my name in fear, not in praise." Jace didn't know what to say. The Queen finally turned. "But I am not here to talk about the past. Come, walk with me." "Walk with a queen?" He stood up slowly and followed her barefoot steps as she moved around the steaming pool. Her pace was slow, almost like she was thinking with each step. "Do you have family, human?" He hesitated. "No. I grew up on an Earth station. No parents, no records, just work." "So you understand what silence feels like," she said. He nodded. "Good. That means you will not lie to me." She stopped, walking, and turned to him. Her eyes searched his face, not like a queen judging a servant, but like someone trying to read a book she had never seen before. "Tell me," she said. "Do you find me strange?" Jace blinked. "You're different, but not in a bad way." "You do not fear my body?" she asked suddenly. He coughed. "I mean, you're tall and powerful. But no, not your body." She tilted her head. "Interesting." Then she did something Jace never expected. She smiled. It was small, almost sad, but it was real. "You are the first man in 20 years who has looked at me and not begged for his life." Jace stepped back, unsure if that was a compliment or a warning. "Most fear me because of what I can do," she continued. "But you only fear doing the wrong thing." She moved closer, not in a threatening way, but like someone reaching out for warmth. "You will return again, not just as a cleaner, as my listener." "My what?" "My listener," she repeated. "You will stand beside me, and when I speak you will hear the words no one else dares to listen to." Jace was stunned. "Why me?" The Queen's eyes softened. "Because I've watched 1,000 stars burn, and none of them ever made me feel seen." She walked away then, silent, graceful, untouchable. But just before she left, she paused at the door and looked back. "I hope tomorrow you'll bring your voice." Then she was gone. Jace stood alone, again, but this time, it didn't feel so empty. The steam around him curled like mist from a dream, and the stars above blinked quietly, like they had seen something strange, something new, something between a lonely queen and a human who never expected to matter. 3. Days later, Jace was no longer just the cleaner. Now, he had a new title, Royal Listener, a made-up title maybe. No one had ever heard of such a thing. But it came straight from Queen Jalara's mouth, and in the palace her word was law. The problem was, not everyone liked it, especially not the guards, not the nobles, not the servants who had trained their entire lives to stand anywhere near the Queen. Now, a low-born human from a cleaning crew walked beside her in the throne hall. It was the first time Jace had ever entered the grand chamber. Everything felt too big. Giant pillars of glowing crystal reached up into a ceiling that showed moving constellations. The air was cool and full of strange music, playing softly from instruments he couldn't even see. And at the far end of the hall was the frozen throne, Queen Jalara stood beside it, tall and proud in a robe of living silk. It shimmered with colors that changed based on her mood. Today, it was blue, with a pulse of violet. She looked calm, but not cold. Beside her, Jace stood awkwardly. He wore plain clothes, clean but far too simple for a place like this. "You may speak," she said softly. Her voice meant only for his ears. Jace leaned closer. "Your people are staring at me like I stole something." "You stole their silence," she answered, "and I don't want it back." One noble finally spoke out loud. "Your Majesty," he said with a sharp voice, "this is highly irregular, a human janitor standing beside you. There are traditions, and those traditions," she cut in, "have not brought me peace." Her eyes glowed just slightly brighter. Everyone fell silent. She turned to Jace. "Walk with me." They moved slowly through the hall, and as they did, the Queen began to speak, not in royal commands, but in stories. "This is where I first sat when I was crowned. I was only 16 cycles. My father had died in battle. My mother disappeared in the fire wars. I was placed on the throne, dressed in jewels, but inside, I was a shaking girl who only wanted her family back." Jace listened quietly. "They told me to smile, to rule, to stay cold. So I did. And for many years, I forgot how to feel anything at all." She stopped walking. "Then you walked in, with soap on your hands and fear in your eyes. And for the first time in decades, someone looked at me like I was human." Jace opened his mouth to reply, but before he could speak, the grand doors burst open. A tall alien general stormed in. His armor was sharp and black, his eyes full of anger. "Your Majesty, this must stop. The people whisper. The outer colonies mock us. They say you have taken a human slave as your consort." Whispers rose around the hall. Jalara didn't blink. "He is no slave." "Then what is he? What has he done to earn this honor?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at Jace. "What do you think?" she asked. Jace hesitated. All eyes were on him. A room full of powerful aliens stared at him like he was a worm. His hands were sweating, but he remembered her words. "Bring your voice." So he did. "I don't know if I deserve to be here," he said, loud enough to echo. "But I know what it's like to be lonely, to be invisible. And maybe someone needs to speak to the Queen not with orders or lies, but with truth." Silence. Then, Jalara smiled again. "Let the record show," she said clearly, "that the human has spoken with more courage than most born on this throne." The hall remained silent, but behind many eyes, respect began to grow. 2 nights after the throne hall incident, Jace couldn't sleep. He lay in a soft chamber. The Queen had moved him to a private guest room far above the servant quarters. The ceiling above him showed shifting stars just like the ones she watched in the bathdome, but his thoughts weren't peaceful. Why was he here? Why did she keep choosing him? And what did she really want? The next morning, before sunrise, a knock came at the crystal door. 2 tall guards stood outside. They didn't speak. They just nodded once and stepped aside, revealing Queen Jalara, alone, cloaked in a dark robe, eyes glowing faintly in the half-light. "Come with me," she said softly. Jace followed. They walked through twisting halls and ancient passages past doors sealed by time. Not even the guards joined them. The deeper they went, the colder it felt. Finally, they reached a giant round chamber hidden beneath the palace. In the center floated a glowing orb, transparent, with light swirling inside like a captured storm. It pulsed when Jalara stepped closer. Jace stared at it. "What is this place?" "This," she said, "is the orb of truth." The Queen stood beside it, her voice calm but serious. "This orb has chosen every ruler of my line. It shows your heart. It sees what you hide. If you are false, it burns you. If you are pure, it blesses you. She turned to him. I want you to place your hands on it. Jace's eyes widened. What? Why me? Because I don't trust myself anymore, she whispered. I've ruled with ice, with silence, but lately, I feel something dangerous. Hope. She stepped back. I must know if this is real, or if I'm only lonely enough to be blind. Jace hesitated. The orb pulsed again, almost like it was breathing. If I touch that, and it sees something bad in me, I could die, right? Yes. He swallowed. He thought of walking away, back to safety, back to being nobody. But something in her eyes stopped him. Not power, not control. Trust, and something like fear. Slowly, Jace stepped forward. He raised both hands and touched the orb of truth. At first, nothing happened. Then, light exploded from the orb, blinding him. He felt heat, then cold, then memories. He saw his own childhood. The small Earth station, sleeping in maintenance rooms, stealing scraps, cleaning floors, always quiet, always invisible. Then came more images. Jilara, sitting alone on a throne, crowds bowing, but no one staying. A crown on her head, chains, in her chest. Suddenly he saw both of them together, in the future, laughing, arguing, growing old, holding hands beneath starlight. The orb pulsed once, then dimmed. Jace gasped, falling to his knees. But he was alive, and glowing symbols now floated above him, shaped like two hearts, one large and alien, one small and human, but linked. Jilara stepped forward slowly. She reached out and touched the symbols. Her hand trembled. It's true, she whispered. The orb accepts you. What does that mean? Jace asked, still breathing hard. It means, she said, you're not just my listener anymore. She dropped to her knees beside him. You are my equal. Jace blinked. Wait, what? You passed the ancient bond trial. The orb doesn't test power. It tests soul. You saw me, and let yourself be seen. He tried to stand, but her hand gently pushed him down. From this day, I will protect you. And one day, if you choose, I will name you consort. His brain couldn't process that. Was she serious? He had just survived a glowing orb from an ancient alien religion. And now the queen of an empire was kneeling beside him, offering him something beyond his understanding. I need time, he said softly. She smiled. Of course. The stars. Do not rush. Later that evening, Jace stood alone in the upper gardens, staring at the twin moons above. He felt different now. Not stronger, but seen. Chosen. He didn't know what this path would bring. But deep inside, something had awakened. Not power. Not love yet. But purpose. And he wasn't going to run from it. But far below the palace, behind sealed walls, others watched the orb room through hidden devices. A group of silent generals stood around a table, their faces angry. She let a human touch the sacred orb, one hissed. And now it glows for him? This is not leadership, another spat. It is weakness. Then came a whisper that silenced them all. We must act, before the queen forgets who she really is. The palace had never felt so quiet. After the orb of truth accepted Jace, everything changed. The queen didn't hide her closeness with him anymore. She walked with him in public. She called on him in meetings. And in private she listened to his strange earth jokes, even if she didn't always understand them. But outside their private world, trouble was growing. In the deep stone halls under the throne chamber, a meeting was happening in secret. 6 alien generals stood in a circle. Their armor was dark, their faces twisted with anger. A human touched the sacred orb, one growled. And now she wants to make him consort, said another. This is madness. She is no longer thinking like a ruler, she's thinking like a woman. A silence followed. The eldest, Among them, the one with a scar across his jaw, spoke last. If we do not stop her, we may soon be saluting a janitor as our king. The next day, Jace walked the queen through the eastern gardens. The wind was soft, and strange flowers opened like stars around them. You've been quiet today, she said, watching him from the corner of her eye. Jace nodded. I keep hearing whispers. Servants acting nervous, guards looking at me like I don't belong. Because you don't, she said calmly. Then she smiled. But that's the point. I'm just worried, Jace admitted. I don't want to cause trouble for you. She stopped walking. You're not causing the trouble, Jace, you're revealing it. He looked at her. You think they'll try something? I know they will. That night, Jace couldn't sleep again. Something didn't feel right. He got up from his bed, walked to the mirror, and stopped cold. There was something strange, a red blinking dot on the far wall. Tiny, almost invisible. He moved closer. A hidden scanner, a secret surveillance device. Someone was watching him. Jace quickly left the room and made his way toward the Queen's chamber. But as he turned the corner, 2 armored guards stepped into his path. The Queen is not to be disturbed, one said flatly. Jace narrowed his eyes. She said I can come any time. Not tonight. Their hands rested on their weapons. Jace didn't argue. He backed away slowly and returned to his room. But his heart was racing now. At sunrise, Queen Jalara entered his chamber without knocking. Why were you blocked from my door? She demanded. Jace stood, rubbing his eyes. I think someone's spying on me. There's a scanner in this room. She walked to the wall, ran her fingers across the stone, and crushed the hidden device with a flash of power. They've made their first move. What do we do now? Jace asked. We make one of our own. Hours later in the grand hall, Queen Jalara called for an emergency assembly. Every high noble, every general, every voice that mattered. And beside her stood Jace. Whispers filled the room. The Queen raised one hand. Silence fell. There are traitors among us, she said, her voice sharp. Cowards hiding behind tradition. They spy on their queen, they threaten the one she trusts. Gasps, eyes darting. But no one spoke. If you fear the human, she continued, it is because you fear change. She turned to Jace. Speak your truth, Jace. You have nothing to hide. Jace stepped forward. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. I didn't ask for this. I was happy being no one. But someone saw me. Not for what I looked like, but for what I felt. He looked at the silent crowd. You don't have to like me. But if you call yourselves servants of the Queen, then respect her choice. He stepped back. A long silence followed. Then, the general with the scar stepped forward. And what if the Queen's choice leads us to ruin? The Queen's eyes narrowed. Then you may challenge me, General. Gasps echoed again. But know this. If you raise a hand against him, you raise a hand against me. That night, Jace returned to his chamber. But he was no longer afraid. He knew the danger was real. But he also knew he was no longer alone. And in the shadows of the palace, those who once whispered now prepared for war. It began with a scream. One of the palace guards ran through the west wing, covered in smoke and blood, shouting a single word, "Rebellion." By the time Jace reached the throne hall, the sky outside had turned red. Fires burned in the lower towers. The Queen's banners had been torn down in some places and replaced with the old war flag of the generals. Queen Jalara stood at the center of the throne room, armored in black silver that pulsed with energy. She held no weapon, but her eyes burned with fury. Jace stood beside her, heart pounding. He wore a thin shield belt and clutched a borrowed plasma staff. He had no idea how to use it. Why didn't you leave when I told you? She asked, not looking at him. Because you didn't mean it, Jace replied, and I'm tired of running. Suddenly, the great doors burst open. The scarred general marched in, leading 50 soldiers in full combat armor. Their weapons glowed, aimed directly at the throne. Zilara, the general called. You were once feared. Now you are mocked. Across the stars, for kneeling beside a human. Zilara's voice was calm. You mistake kindness for weakness. I mistake weakness for love. He raised his hand. Take them both. Alive, if possible. The room exploded into chaos. Blaster fire lit the air. Guards on the Queen's side rushed to defend her. The floor shook with explosions. Smoke filled the throne room as plasma bolts flew past Jace's head. Jace ducked and crawled to a pillar. A soldier ran at him. He swung the staff wildly, hitting the attacker in the leg. To his shock, the alien screamed and dropped. He had landed a hit. Not bad for a janitor, Jace muttered. He turned, only to see 3 soldiers rushing Zilara. Look out! But they were already too close. The Queen spun, her armor glowing. With one burst of energy, she sent 2 flying across the hall. The 3rd soldier stabbed at her with a plasma blade. It cut into her arm. She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She only got angrier. With her bare hand, she grabbed the attacker's helmet and crushed it. Jace rushed to her side. You're bleeding. Later, she said through clenched teeth. We're not done. Another explosion. The power lights in the room blinked. Smoke poured from the upper balconies. Suddenly, a voice echoed above them. Stop! Everyone turned. The orb of truth floated into the chamber, glowing brighter than ever. But it wasn't alone. Behind it hovered something far older, a council relic, once thought lost. A device that stored the will of past rulers. And somehow, Jace had activated it. The floating relic began to speak, in the voice of Zilara's. Mother, to betray the Queen is to betray the throne itself. The rebel soldiers froze. Their weapons dimmed. The scarred general growled, furious. That thing speaks lies. No, Zilara said. It speaks history. She stepped forward, bleeding but tall. Let them hear the truth. My reign does not end with blood. It begins with change. She raised her hand, and the throne behind her lit up. Energy burst from the seat of power, striking the rebel weapons. They overloaded, exploding. In their owner's hands, soldiers screamed. The general roared, rushing forward with a blade. Jace acted without thinking. He threw himself in front of her. The blade hit him in the side. He fell. Zilara caught him before he hit the floor. No, she whispered, holding him close. No. His breath was shaky. I guess I still don't know how to use a staff. Why did you protect me? She asked, voice cracking. Because no one protected me when I was alone, he whispered. But you saw me. Tears formed in her glowing eyes. The throne pulsed again, and this time, it healed. Light poured from the stone platform into her hands, then into Jace's wound. The scar faded. His eyes blinked open. He was alive. The generals were captured. The rebellion crushed. But the empire had changed forever. That night the palace was quiet again. Zilara sat beside Jace in the garden. She took his hand. I was raised to rule alone, she said. But I've learned something. What's that? Even the coldest stars burn brighter when they share their light. Jace smiled. So what now? She looked up at the stars. Now, we write a new story. The Queen's choice. The stars over Vraxia Prime looked different now. Brighter. Calmer. Free. The rebellion was over. The traitor generals were taken away, their weapons destroyed, their ranks broken. For the first time, in decades, the palace no longer whispered with fear. It echoed with change. And at the center of that change stood 2 people no one expected. A queen born of frost, and a human raised in shadows. Jace sat on the edge of the royal balcony staring at the twin moons rising slowly. He was tired. His muscles ached. His side was still sore from the stab wound, even though the throne's power had saved him, but mostly his heart was full. Not with pride, with confusion. He still couldn't believe what had happened. He had been a janitor, a nobody, a man who cleaned up after people who didn't even look at him. And now half the galaxy knew his name. Behind him, the soft sound of boots touching the floor echoed. He turned to see Jalara. No crown, no armor. Just a soft flowing robe of deep violet that caught the moonlight like water. "The council awaits," she said quietly. He looked down. "I'm not sure I'm ready." She stepped beside him, sitting down. "You weren't ready when you entered the bath chamber, or the orb room, or the throne hall. And yet, here you are." Jace gave a small laugh. "You make it sound easy." Nothing was easy. That's why it mattered. They sat together in silence. Then she reached into her robe and pulled out a small box, simple, silver, old. She handed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ring. Not metal, but made from crystal dust formed in the heart of a star. "In my world," she said, "this is not just a bond of love. It is a bond of unity. A vow between two different worlds." Jace stared at it. "Jalara, are you asking me to—" She nodded once. "I am not asking you to serve me or follow me. I'm asking you to stand beside me. As a partner, as a mate, as the one I choose." His hands shook slightly. "Are you sure your people will accept this?" "They accepted war for 1,000 years," she said. "Let's see if they can accept something new." Jace smiled, then slowly picked up the ring. "Then let's give them something to talk about." A ceremony like no other. The next morning, the palace was alive. Drums from 3 star systems echoed through the grand sky halls. Alien flowers bloomed on the walls, releasing scents never before mixed. Guests arrived. Royals, warriors, scholars, even peasants, all dressed in their finest. It wasn't just a royal joining, it was a message that this galaxy was ready to change. And at the center of it all, Jay stood tall in ceremonial robes designed for him alone, deep gray and white, with glowing silver lines matching the queen's. Jalara entered the hall last. The crowd stood. She walked like a ruler, but her eyes never left him. "Are you ready?" she asked when they stood face to face. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm here." She nodded, and together, they turned to the people. The high priest lifted the orb, the same orb of truth that had chosen Jace. It floated between them, glowing bright, and as they touched it together, the light turned gold, a symbol of union, of balance, of rebirth. "From this moment," the priest spoke, "let this bond rewrite the stars." The crowd roared, cheers, applause, even tears, but the loudest sound came not from the crowd. It came from the stars themselves, as across the galaxy, screens lit up with the moment the Queen of Vraxia and a human from Earth became one. Days later, they walked through the old bath chamber. Jace chuckled as he ran a hand along the polished wall. "This is where it all started." Jalara smirked. "You were shaking so hard I thought you might faint. You told me to scrub your back. I thought I was about to die." "You kind of did," she teased. "The man who entered that room died. The one standing here now? He was born that day." Jace smiled. "Then let me return the favor." Reached down, picked up the sponge, and dipped it in warm water. "Your Majesty," he said playfully, "may I scrub your back once more?" She raised an eyebrow. "Only if you know what you're doing this time." He leaned close. "I do." And together, they stepped into the mist, not as queen and servant, not as ruler and outsider, but as two souls who found each other in silence and built a new world in its place. Across the stars, some called it a scandal, others a miracle, but no one could deny what came after. The wars began to slow. The frozen alliances started to melt. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to listen, to talk, to understand, and when they asked the Queen why she chose a human to stand beside her, she only answered, because he didn't come with power, he came with heart, and that's what we were all missing. Final scene. Many years later, a young alien girl with bright violet eyes ran through the palace. Garden. "Father," she shouted, "tell me again how you met Mother." Jace sat on a bench, a little older now, watching her run in circles. He smiled. "It started with a sponge," he said, laughing. "A sponge? What's that?" He stood and picked her up. "It's how I cleaned floors and how I fell in love with a queen." From the balcony above, Zilara watched them both, smiling as her daughter giggled in her father's arms. She turned and walked back into the palace. There was much to do, a galaxy to guide, a world to reshape. But for now, she was at peace, because love had made her powerful, and a human had taught her how to feel it.